Welcome back. The newsreader and Crime Watch presenter Jill Dando was a household name and beloved TV personality up and down the country, but on the 26th of April 1999, she was shot dead outside her home in Fulham. 24 years on, her shocking killing remains frustratingly unexplained and unsolved. But released today was a brand new Netflix documentary that asked the question, who killed Jill Dando? Look.
She was so polished and so professional.
Jill Dando!
In many ways, I think people saw Jill as a TV Diana.
So glamorous, it's wonderful.
Jill was at the top of her game.
She was the nation's sweetheart.
The golden girl of British television, murdered on her doorstep in broad daylight.
Now, Barry George, a local sex offender, was convicted of Jill's murder in 2001, but after serving 7 years of a life sentence was acquitted at a retrial. Since then, there have been several theories about Jill's killing, such as that she was a victim of a professional hit or mistaken identity. But earlier today, her brother Nigel revealed his belief about what really happened.
And so my theory, which I still stick to, I don't know how true it is, again, people may say it's quite fanciful, but that Jill was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Delighted to be joined now by the investigative journalist, former policeman Mark Williams-Thomas. Mark, you have uniquely had access to thousands of pieces of evidence from the Met's inquiry into Jill Dando's murder. So firstly, do you agree with her brother's theory?
No, good evening, Dan. No, I mean, this was a professional hit all day long. The police initially thought it was a professional hit. Then a year later, that's when Barry George comes into the frame, and Detective Chief Inspector Hamish Campbell at the time, who was leading the investigation, became utterly fixated on Barry George. And as a result of that, they then looked for evidence to be able to fit him to the crime. And as a result of that, even the third offender profile was designed to identify and to fit Barry George. The offender profile should never do that. In fact, an offender profile shouldn't be written when you have a potential suspect in mind. The whole investigation was fundamentally flawed. I had unique access to every single police case file of the investigation, and a number of years ago I put a program together which you can view on Amazon and actually on YouTube, and that program analysed in real detail every aspect of that case, and we looked at certain aspects. For example, there were over 100 suspects that the police had never bothered to follow up on, and that is because they became utterly fixated on Barry George.
Now, you have spoken to Barry George today, I believe. There are still some who want to throw him under the bus, and you're outraged about this, aren't you, Mark, because you are certain of his innocence?
Absolutely. When I approached Barry George a number of years ago for my programme, I was, like others, very sceptical and thought, you know what, he's been acquitted, but let's look at the evidence and see where it goes. And as I say, I had the unique access to see all of the files and watch hours and hours of videos, interviews with him, where he gave his answers. And I can tell you very clearly that there is no way that Barry George committed that crime. It was a professional hit, a single shot to the back of the ear, clearly by a organised criminal who knew exactly what they were doing, and of course haven't been caught, which plays into very much the aspect of how professional they were. Barry George doesn't fit the profile in any way at all, and that's why they became fixated on him. I spoke to Barry today. He did that Netflix interview with his lawyer, and he hasn't seen what's being cut yet. But I also spoke to his sister. One of the things that concerns me, and it's the same line that actually Hamish Campbell took on the BBC Panorama programme, when he was asked in relation to who he thought committed the crime, he says his mind hasn't been changed. He's been very clear to say, in his view, that it is Barry George. Barry George was acquitted by a court. The evidence is overwhelming that he wasn't responsible. And actually, Hamish Campbell would be much better accepting some responsibility for a fundamentally flawed investigation where they failed to follow up on numerous lines of inquiry. And still to date, many of those lines of inquiries that still haven't been done What Hamish Campbell should be saying, and indeed what the Metropolitan Police should be saying, is we're reopening this investigation. There are huge amounts of lines of inquiry that haven't been done. We even had the Director of Public Prosecutions at the time, Alison Saunders, not being truthful in relation to offender profiles being taken place. This is the biggest unsolved, high-profile murder investigation in the capital, and I'm shocked. And Michael Mansfield's called for it. I'm calling for it. This case should be reopened.
And do you think this Netflix documentary, which of course will catapult this story to an international audience, makes it more likely that we could ever see the mystery solved and find out who indeed did kill Jill Dando?
Well, this case is only going to be solved if the Metropolitan Police take the stance to reopen it. Hamish Campbell has come out and said very clearly that he believes that Barry George is responsible. And he may well fall foul of those words if the lawyers decide to take action against him. But what is interesting is whether or not the Metropolitan Police have that view. He is a retired senior officer. He led the investigation. And I'm waiting for a response from the Metropolitan Police, what their stance is in respect of that. I saw there was no reference or no reply from the Metropolitan Police in relation to the programme. I don't know if they were even given a right to reply in respect of it. But I want to know what the Metropolitan Police are saying about this. Do they believe that Barry George is still responsible? He's been acquitted by a court. And they now need to open this investigation. So it's great that it's now got a public platform. It clearly shows that Barry George is not responsible. Now we need the Metropolitan Police to eat a bit of humble pie, reopen this investigation and follow up the many lines of inquiry that Hamish Campbell and the rest of his team failed to do.
Mark Williams-Thomas on the horrifying and still unsolved murder of Jill Dando. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much, Mark.